Hi, my name is Brent Dodge. I'm a physical therapist and owner of Alpine Physical Therapy in Missoula, Montana. I bring with me a 20-year history as a physical therapist with board certification in orthopedics and have worked for many years in the area of work injury management, all the way from computerized settings to tractor-trailer rigs, mills, mines, and every point in between. So I've had a great background in terms of helping workers improve performance and really protect their bodies from some of the repetitive strains that can otherwise occur. So today I want to talk with you briefly about the topic of work-related musculoskeletal disorders, abbreviated WMSD. Work-related musculoskeletal disorders comprise a group of painful disorders that can impact the body's tissues. And we'll talk more about those specific tissues in just a little bit. But some of the familiar terms you might be aware of would be carpal tunnel syndrome, neck tension syndrome, even low back pain fall under the heading of these WMSDs. You may be familiar with the term repetitive strain injury, which also includes a variety of these topics like carpal tunnel syndrome that we've mentioned, as well as tendinitis of the forearm, wrist, and hand. The difference is that not all work-related musculoskeletal disorders involve repetitive problems. Because work-related musculoskeletal disorders come about from a variety of factors that impact the body, and typically it takes more than just one of those factors, which I'll now mention, to lead to a problem within the body. So let's talk about these factors that include repetition. The first is body position, and that has to do with the way we align ourselves to do our job. For example, at a computer, making sure our hips and knees are properly aligned and angled, making sure that our head is upright on the neck and the upper back, that it's not forward or cocked off to one side. Likewise, in the wrist and hands, making sure that if we're using a keyboard or a mouse, that we deal with the proper alignment or the neutral alignment in that part of the body. So body alignment has a lot to do with how our body tolerates our activities at work. Second is repetition, and this is a biggie because a lot of the things that we do at work may become repetitive, and if we don't give our bodies a chance to rest and recover, the repetition can be a problem. But again, it's typically repetition in conjunction with another factor that would lead to the potential for a work-related musculoskeletal disorder. When we think of repetition, the key word to keep in mind is fatigue. Because if we end up working to a point where our tissues in our hands, our forearms, even our low back become fatigued, we put ourselves on a slippery slope toward potential symptoms such as numbness, tingling, pain, or otherwise. So when you're working and you're doing repetitive types of tasks, if you work into a point of fatigue, that's a dangerous step toward the potential for a work-related musculoskeletal disorder, and again, particularly when there are other factors involved. Another factor is force. And even sitting at a computer, for example, and working a mouse or hitting a button on the mouse doesn't seem like a lot of force. But when that force is combined with, again, repetition or awkward body postures, the potential is big for a potential onset of symptoms. And the fourth area is the pace of work. This is a key factor because administratively, if you're involved in a situation where you are unable to stop the flow of work, meaning that your repetition continues and you don't have a chance to stop and rest and recover, there's an even greater potential for a problem. The other factor that can occur when there are large volumes of work that have to be done with a deadline, that creates stress. Stress in and of itself can lead to problems of muscle tension, and muscle tension in turn can then lead to constriction and problems that develop pain, or some of the numbness and tingling that we talked about. So pace of work is important because when we're overloaded with work and we're given a deadline, the potential is big for a potential onset of a work-related musculoskeletal disorder, particularly when there are other factors involved, such as force, repetition, or problems with body alignment. I think the key here in pace of work, particularly for people that are freelance workers, you're not guided by any type of standardized workstation or how that workstation is set up ergonomically. And so you may be working in a situation where you need to take on more work, and you really don't look at the clock to know that you've worked a number of hours, you've put in some grueling hours, and you've worked hard during those hours, and as a result, your pace of work is much higher than someone who is not freelance, because we know that in freelance world, time equals money. And so I want you to be aware that pace of work is a big piece there that you may need to take greater control of, particularly in that freelance setting. If you're not in a freelance setting, hopefully that comes under the administrative controls of how the business is done, such that the worker can still get a small amount of rest and recovery, which I will talk about momentarily. Briefly now, let's talk about the impact on the body's tissues. Work-related musculoskeletal disorders, as we've talked about, can impact the body's tissues. 3 in particular: muscle, nerve, and tendon. Now, we've alluded to muscle tissue already and the fact that when you have a high pace of work and potential deadlines, that builds stress in our bodies. When we have stress, we tend to collect our stress in different places where we feel muscle tension. And anytime there's constriction in muscles, there's a potential for onset of muscle soreness, muscle aching, and that other word we used, fatigue. And we know that the step into fatigue is a step to a slope toward potential onset of these symptoms that we've mentioned. With muscle use, the body's natural physiology can create lactic acid. You've probably felt that if you haven't run for a while and you go out for a long run, your muscles get pretty doggone sore later in that day or even into the next day. That's your body's buildup of lactate or lactic acid, and it's an excess of that because of muscle tension and muscle activity that can actually lead to muscle problems and lead to this group of disorders that we're talking about, the work-related musculoskeletal disorders. The second area is tendons that can be impacted. Tendons connect muscle to bone. And so when the muscles are working, the tendons are beginning to glide to begin to move the joints to give us the ability to reach and grab or push or pull. However, when the body is forced to repetitively use those muscles and pull on those tendons, sometimes those tendons where they go through a canal or a tunnel can begin to wear and tear and build up additional fibrous tissue inside of that tunnel, leading to a problem in the tendon, and it's a big word, called tenosynovitis. That means the tendon and the sheath around it, the synovium, become inflamed. Becomes a very challenging problem and one that's difficult to treat. Again, the 3 areas we're looking at: muscle, tendon, and nerve. We've talked about muscle. We've talked about tendon. Let's talk about nerve. You're probably most familiar with the nerve problem called carpal tunnel syndrome. That is one of the 3 nerves that runs down the forearm from the neck, where it bundles up and comes into the arm and hand, and runs through a tunnel in the front of the wrist called the carpal tunnel. The nerve itself runs along with additional tendons in the area, and it's enclosed in a finite space called the carpal tunnel. Anything that takes up space in the carpal tunnel will begin to compress the median nerve that supplies sensory information and motor information to this part of the hand. And so if there's compression on that nerve, and that's what ends up happening with these work-related musculoskeletal disorders, is a compression around or on top of the nerve, you may begin to feel some achiness into the place where the nerve goes, some tingling, even a loss of sensation like a numbness. Eventually, you can even end up with weakness where the muscles that are supplied by that nerve don't do their job as well. So overall, what we're talking about are nerve compressions. The main one that we've talked about is carpal tunnel syndrome. So we've talked about the impact of work-related musculoskeletal disorders on muscle, tendon, and nerve. So the question is, what are some ways to offset the potential for this group of disorders, knowing that we're oftentimes faced with high-paced work? We have a certain amount of work that has to be done. We know we're in a work setting that may not be optimal. Maybe that needs to be looked at and looking at ergonomics and things like that. But what are some other things that we can sort of take control of to push this thing out and ensure that we don't go down that road? Well, here are some ideas I'd like to talk about briefly. The first is ergonomics, and that has to do with the way that we do our work. That has a lot to do with the way that our workstation is aligned. There's a lot of information available even online about how you set up your computer, where your computer screen should be, that it shouldn't be off to the side causing your neck to be cocked in one direction, that you shouldn't have to tilt your head down if the screen is too low, or if the mouse is too far out, ending up with potential shoulder problems. These are all discussed in a variety of places on the internet and in various other resources. There are also people available, such as physical therapists, occupational therapists, and even ergonomic specialists that can come in and help you with your workstation to get that aligned so you're working optimally in terms of ergonomics. The second area is one that I really want to mention in terms of avoiding fatigue. We talked about repetition and the fact that a lot of times we get into a repetitive action that can lead our bodies to fatigue and how dangerous that is in potentially leading down a road toward these problems of work-related musculoskeletal disorders. Well, there's a couple of tools out there that can be used to offset fatigue and avoiding going down that road. One is called the 20-20 rule. I use the 20-20 rule because it's easy to remember and that you know that every 20 minutes of work you need to take 20 seconds, that's the 20-20 rule, to stop and do something for you. It's as simple as taking a few seconds to breathe deeply and start getting some oxygen back into the deeper part of the lungs, to bring oxygen to the tissues of the low back, the neck, the shoulders, where maybe we've been holding some tension. For people that are keyboarding a lot or running a mouse, a great stretch that can be done in a very few seconds is a position like this where the hands come together and you begin to open and stretch a little bit along the front near where that nerve that we talked about goes, the median nerve. That's a gentle stretch. I like to do one where I get my hands behind my back and open up my front chest. Sometimes we get pulled into a position like this and we really need to open up where those nerves and those arteries are going that supply the forearm and hand. For people that are seated for a long time, it could be as simple as standing up and stretching the front part of the hip. And again, getting some good breathing going, because that's important for offsetting fatigue that can lead down that dangerous road. The 20-20 rule is a simple method of making sure that every 20 minutes you take a little bit of time, 20 seconds for yourself and for your body. I also recommend a small break every hour, if possible, to take 2 or 3 minutes to get away from your workstation, go get a drink of water, get some hydration going, get some breaths of fresh air, go on a brisk walk around the office or the workstation. And at lunch, get out, get a short brisk walk of 10 minutes. And even at home, there's some ideas of rest and recovery which will help your body begin to heal and overcome the potential for fatigue, such as taking a walk, taking a very brief nap, doing some gentle stretches in the parts of the body that may feel tense. So the 20-20 rule keyed in on the idea of rest and recovery. And I'm not talking about a vacation here. I'm talking about giving your body a break. It's like an industrial athlete, which you are. You know that you're going to work, you're at your workstation generally, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Well, imagine an athlete going to a gym to work out. You're not going to spend 8 to 12 hours working out the same muscle group over and over again, and you're certainly not going to do that several days consecutively. So athletes will break up their workouts where they'll work chest one day and their back the next. They're breaking things up so they don't overwork one particular area of the body. And I think that's important as you look at helping your body stay healthy at the workplace, to do some rest and recovery. Every 20 minutes, 20 seconds of something. Give your body a break. Every hour, 2 to 3 minutes. Take some time at lunch. Take some time before or after work to heal and help your body recover. There's even a program called Rsi Guard. That's Repetitive Stress Injury Guard. If you go to the internet, it's rsigard.com. This is a tool that can help. It's a comprehensive tool, don't get me wrong. But the key in there is that there's a reminder that you can set so that every now and again you get your body where you can give yourself a break. So I recommend a tool like Rsi Guard. We've talked about ergonomics. We've talked about the 20-20 rule. We've talked about Rsi Guard. The other key that I want to leave you with today is early recognition. This is not a game to play with. These work-related musculoskeletal disorders, when they begin, have a tendency to worsen. They don't have a tendency to get better on their own. If there's a problem with body position, force, repetition, or work pace, and the potential is there, if you have an onset of a symptom, it's best to get that taken care of right away. You begin waking up early in the morning with a feeling of numbness or tingling in your hand, that's a red light, a red flag. You feel some discomfort and tension in your forearm or in your neck or upper shoulder area, there may be something going on that can be fixed early on, such as changing the workstation, the ergonomics we talked about, having somebody look at that and help you with that. It may be that you need to employ some more of the rest and recovery concepts that we talked about. Or it may need a visit to your healthcare provider. And so I really recommend that early recognition is a key toward offsetting a potential lifetime of problems and symptoms. And believe me, work-related musculoskeletal disorders can create a lifelong problem. So it's best to head it off early. I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and provide this information for you today.